Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. You are listening to the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci. That's me. Today's episode is a daily dose edition, and specifically, this is episode number 7 in our series, our podcast series of episodes that is discussing and covering what I call the 10 sales rules for startup founders, or the 10 first principles when it comes to scaling sales at your startup. So going back to the early spring, I started with a LinkedIn post where I just detailed for myself, based on my experience, both, of course, as a head of sales at 3 different Silicon Valley startups, as well as the last decade that my team and I have been coaching B2B tech founders and their startups to grow and scale. What I found is that at the end of the day, we can teach tactics, we can teach systems, we can build strategies. But at the end of the day, when we look at a startup and a startup team and startup founders that are truly successful, that get out of the early stages of startup land, that were the point where they're not really a startup anymore, they're truly becoming a scale up. When we look at those success principles, those people that are successful, those companies that have been successful, and we compare those to those that never even get those first 10 customers, or worse, in some respects, those companies that get customers, they get revenue, they even get a little bit of funding, but they end up in this middle ground that I call sales purgatory, where maybe they were even doing a couple $1 million in revenue, but yet the founder is way too involved with sales. They haven't figured out how to scale. They haven't figured out how to grow beyond those first 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 customers. The biggest difference that I found over and over and over when I do an introspection and I do a retrospective of those companies is that the founders that have succeeded are the ones that have followed at least a few of these 10 sales rules for startup founders. And so I felt it important to document those as much for you, the listener, as it was for me, to really understand, what is the difference between founders that are successful and the founders that just don't quite get to the place they want to get to, which is to make an impact in their market for their customers. And so what we've been doing over the course of the last couple of months is recording these episodes so that each episode covers in detail one of those sales principles. So this is episode number 7 in this series. And so the first 6 principles that we've covered so far that you can go back and find here in the podcast feed, I'll cover those pretty quickly. I'm just going to summarize what those first 6 were, and then I'm going to talk about topic number 7 today. You can find this episode, of course, right now, and then you'll find the last couple of episodes to round out this podcast series coming out in the next couple of weeks. Okay. So principle number 1 we covered is that sales is an everyday activity. Sales is an everyday activity, meaning that as a founder, as an early stage team, sales is not an afterthought. After you work on product, after you work on engineering, after you think about fundraising, after you think about something else, marketing or something else in the business, sales must be an everyday activity. As simple as doing 10 touches a day or 20 outreaches a day, or making sure that you're booking appointments consistently for yourself, day to day, week to week, month to month. That's the only way you're going to start selling your product and continue to sell your product, is to make sales an everyday activity. That was principle number 1. Principle number 2 is that nobody cares about your product. Nobody cares about your product. What we mean by that is that, yes, you built your product to solve a problem or to help your customers achieve a strategic priority. Those are the things that your customers care about. They only care about your product so far as you show them how you will help them solve that problem, or how you will help them achieve that strategic priority. And so the trap that many teams fall into, many startup founders, and even large companies, I see this over and over and over, is that the salespeople or the people doing the selling fall in love with the product, and every conversation with the prospect, every demo, every meeting is about the product, the product, the product. And we never do enough to understand the customer's problem or their strategic priorities. So principle number 2 is that nobody cares about your product. Principle number 3, implementing equals learning. Implementing equals learning. What does that mean? It means that, a lot of what we're doing every single day as startup founders, every day, every week, every month, every quarter, every year, there's a lot of unknowns out there. Obviously, there's lots of information that we can get. There's, ideas that we can gather from other startups that have been successful. We can read blog posts, go to LinkedIn. We can listen to podcasts like this. We can sit in on webinars. We can talk to advisors. We can talk to investors. We can talk to our own team. We can talk to our customers. We can come up with all of these ideas of what we should be doing. But at the end of the day, we're never going to know if those ideas were good ideas or bad ideas until we implement. And so we talk about this all the time with our clients in our program, is that when you join a coaching call and we give you some ideas and we tell you, hey, try these 2 or 3 things, some of them may work and you will win. Maybe you try this new approach to outbound emails and you book some meetings. Maybe you try this new approach to how to run your product demos and you find that you're able to move those deals into the late stage and eventually convert them. We hope that those are the outcomes that we want. We want you to win when you implement a new strategy or a new system or a new skill. However, you may not, and that's okay, because we are treading into or walking into uncharted territories. Whether you win or not is less important than whether or not you win or learn. So that new approach to outbound may not work, but it could lead us to the next iteration and the next iteration and the next, which does get you the meetings booked that you want. Or maybe the exact approach that we tried with this particular demo didn't work exactly, but there's some kernels of information we could take from it and improve the next one, right? So implementing equals learning. If we just sit on ideas and wonder and hope and say we should and we might and we could, instead of actually we did, you will never know if those ideas are any good, right? So that was number 3. Number 4, product problem fit before product market fit. Product problem fit before product market fit. So this goes back to, in some ways, number 2, which nobody cares about your product, in that think about you and your company, whether you're the founder or the co-founder or an early stage contributor. Every single startup started with, hey, there's a problem in the marketplace, or there's an opportunity, a gap that exists that nobody else is taking advantage of. Nobody else is filling that gap. Nobody's taking advantage of that opportunity. So what we have to do when we're first going to market, before we get to this ability to serve an entire marketplace and get to that nirvana state of product market fit, the first thing we need to do, even with the first $1 million, $2 million, even $5, $10 million in revenue, is make sure that we're establishing product problem fit before we get to product market fit, meaning that we need to show ourselves and our customers that our product solves that problem that they have, and that they see the value so much so that they're willing to give us money. And if we can repeat those transactions over and over and over, then we get to a place where we start to feel that equivalent of product market fit. So until you get product problem fit, you're not going to be on the path to product market fit. So that was number 4. Number 5 is something I've learned from Aaron Ross, and he talks a lot about this. If you don't know Aaron Ross, please check him out on LinkedIn, as well as a couple of books that he wrote. One of the things he talks about all the time, and I learned this not just from him, but certainly solidified this information for me, as well as for our clients when we had him come in and do a training in our coaching program. He talks about narrow your niche. Narrow your niche, meaning that one example he gave, or a thought exercise he gave to our clients in that training, was imagine if you could only sell to 10 companies in the world. Who would those 10 be and why? Get down to a niche that's so painful that it feels so constraining that you couldn't believe, like, man, I'm only going to sell to 10, really? And the reason that's important is because it goes back to this idea of product problem fit before product market fit. We have to make sure we're really, really understanding the problems we solve, the priorities we help our customers achieve in a very small, confined environment. Because if we try to sell to too many types of companies across too many types of industries, different company sizes, different geographic locations, different verticals, whether that's healthcare or fintech or telecom or pharmaceuticals or something else, right? We tend to have this FOMO, fear of missing out. There's so much opportunity. The total addressable market could be in the billions or even trillions, depending on your product, depending on your industry. But in order to really understand how you're solving those problems and why people are buying from you and how to sell to those early customers, is you must narrow your niche. So that was number 5. Number 6 was focus on now and worry about later. This is actually the one that I tackled first in the podcast series, because I wanted to make that I felt like this is one of the most important things we can all do every day. And the idea here of focus on now and worry about later is knowing what are the now things in our business, meaning like, what do we have to accomplish this month or this quarter or this year, as opposed to the later things. So for example, let's say you've gotten your first 10 customers, you've gotten a couple $100,000 in revenue. The now thing for you in the next 6 to 12 months should be, how do we go from 300K and 10 customers to 30 customers and $1 million in revenue? That's the next step in your journey. That's the now. How do we move from investor introductions and using network and maybe a little bit of conference work and sort of randomness to get leads to a place where we have a more repeatable lead generation process, right? That's the now thing for you. Getting more consistency around your pricing model, getting more consistency on how you map out your sales process. Those are all the now things versus a later thing, which might be, hey, how do I hire a VP of sales? Well, at 300K in revenue and 10 customers, there's no reason for you to even think about hiring a VP of sales. That is a later thing. Or saying to yourself, well, how do we, we've had these 10 customers and we're selling to small banks. How do we begin to sell to the healthcare system because they have the same problem? You know what? That's a later thing. Let's go back to narrowing on your niche. Let's make sure we understand exactly how to sell to those small banks. Let's build our revenue to $1 million or 3 or even 10 just selling to small banks so that we can later on move to other verticals and other market segments, right? So focus on now and worry about later. So those are the first 6 principles. Now, that was a quick random, not so random summary there. Now what I want to talk about is in this episode, our next principle I want to cover is actually I'm going to jump to number 8, which is hire slowly and fire quickly. Hire slowly and fire quickly. The reason I'm going to jump to number 8 is because the number 7 sales rule is you can't scale what you don't have. You can't scale what you don't have. And the reason I'm skipping that for now is for a couple of reasons. Most of all, because this is an idea that was first presented to me in these words, you can't scale what you don't have, from Amy Volas over at Avenue Talent Partners. And so Amy and I just came out just a couple of weeks ago. We were in Chicago and we ran a spectacular, if I don't mind saying, spectacular in-person event for startup founders and early stage teams. And this was exactly what we were teaching to those entrepreneurs, to those founders, to those venture-backed startups that needed to understand what they needed to do now versus later, meaning you can't scale what you don't have. And what does it mean to build out a repeatable process from sales? And what does it mean to build out a repeatable system when it comes to identifying the right talent at the right time and the right person? And so I want to make sure that I'm talking with her about that topic. So I'm working with Amy to schedule in a time where she and I can jam on this topic, because this is something I learned from her in these words: you can't scale what you don't have. And I want to make sure to get her input and get her perspectives on that specific sales principle number 7. So that is why we are moving to number 8 in this episode: hire slowly and fire quickly. Okay. Before we get into that, real quick, because this podcast is brought to you by me and Sales Qualia. As you listen to these podcasts and you hear me, even if this is your very first episode, or maybe you've listened and you've been following the show for quite some time, we cover these kinds of principles and we try to do this kind of education because we know how important it is to help founders understand what it truly takes to get from startup mode to ramp up mode to scale up mode. And that's what we do each and every day with our clients in our startup selling coaching program. And so if you're a startup founder that's a founder of a B2B tech company, you find that you feel like you're friendly and you're coachable, you're looking for help, you really want to get out of this founder-led or even founder-everything sales process that you might be ensconced in right now, and you want to get to a place where it's founder-less selling, meaning there's a whole lot less of you, the founder, getting involved with the sales process, then if you find yourself in that position right now, and you're thinking ahead to the next few months and of course the next few years, and you want to get some help with that, then I'd like to offer you some help to do that. That's exactly what we do every day. And so one of the best ways we can start by helping you is running what I call a situation session. So it's a 20-minute call. And in that call, I'm going to, beforehand, we're going to ask you to share a few bits of information about who you're targeting at your customer, what are some of the challenges you have, where are you now from a revenue and customer standpoint versus where you want to be in the next 12 months, just so I have some baseline information going into that call. And then in that call, what we'll do is review your existing sales process, identify and talk about some of those gaps and challenges and some of those headwinds that you're feeling. And then I will be able to give you right there on that call a couple of quick ideas that you'll be able to implement right away. And if it makes sense for us to have a longer conversation and chat about how the team and I might be able to help you implement some of those ideas and help you grow and scale the way that you want to, then we can do that as well. So the best way to get that call in the books is simply send me an email, Scott at salesqualia, Scott, SCOTT at salesqualia, QUALIA.com. Just type the word private into the subject line. That will tell my assistant and me that you just want to have a private consult with me, this 20-minute situation session. We'll handle all the details, send you a Calendly, get that all booked, send you the type form to share a few details, and we'll be off to the races. Okay. So type in private into an email, open up your email right now. You can shoot me an email, Scott at salesqualia.com, type the word private, and we will get that time set up. Okay. So take a sip of coffee and let's get rolling with sales principle number 8, hire slowly, fire quickly. Hire slowly, fire quickly. So many different angles I was thinking about taking with this particular sales principle. And the thing that I landed on most of all was thinking about the experiences that some of our clients have had, some of the founders out there that are not clients, but those that I talk with every day, that they have had when it comes to hiring or attempting to hire sales talent for their business. And so this idea that hire slowly and fire quickly, I want to first talk about the hire slowly piece, because there's multiple connotations there. So hire slowly could mean, hey, we have decided to hire an account executive. And so hiring slowly means we're going to take our time. We're going to be really clear about the job specifications, the kind of person we're looking for. We're going to take lots of applicants. We're going to do a large amount of screening. We're going to have a very deliberate very deliberate interview process so that we can do our best to find the best person for this job. Of course, that's an example of how you would want to hire slowly, is to run what a recruiter like Amy would say. She would say, you want to run a process, right? Hire slowly is an example of what you need to do. Now, even before you get to that place where you're actually running a hiring process, this concept of hire slowly also means identifying even if you should be hiring sales talent at all, and which kinds of sales talent, what kind of roles should you be hiring for right now for your business. So, some of the stories that I hear from our own clients in the past that they've had, or other founders that I talked to, for example, when I talked earlier in this podcast about the now versus later, one of the examples where people have hired quickly is they've decided, hey, we've gotten 10 customers and $300K in revenue, and we've closed a $2 million seed round, and our investors have said, hey, go scale. So what do I do as a founder? I'm like, great, I need a VP of sales. And so I'm going to go find a VP of sales, and good news, one of the investors that's investing in us knows a person that has industry experience, and they're going to introduce me, and I talk to that person and 2 or 3 others, but I feel like this person, the investor introduced me, is the right person. So I'm going to get this person in as a VP of sales, and great news, we were able to turn that around in 4 weeks' time. Whoa. So first of all, you didn't hire slowly and that you didn't run a full process. But more importantly, are you sure you should be hiring a VP of sales in the first place? Because if we jump ahead to that, you can't scale what you don't have. That's coming in a future episode. Hiring a VP of sales when you are doing $300K in revenue or have 10 customers, but you don't really have any kind of repeatable sales process because those customers came from network introductions, maybe some, Bluebird inbound, somebody that found you at a conference, right? You don't have a repeatable way of getting leads. And then when you actually manage those sales processes for those 10 deals, everyone was a little bit different. Maybe you talk to the head of marketing for one sale, and you talk to the head of operations for another, and for a third as a director of product management. You don't really have a lot of clarity as to how to actually run a full sales process. Some of the pricing might have been all over the map. Maybe your first customer is paying you $2,000 a month, and your 5th customer is paying you $5,000 a month, and then your 7th customer did a $30K prepay for the full 12 months. And you're kind of like, don't have a really clear selling process in place, right? And then when it comes to support of those customers, it's still kind of you as a founder or one of your engineers is helping to do the customer support tickets and fix the bugs, right? So without any kind of sales process, You're certainly not ready to hire a VP of sales because that's something you as the founder need to figure out. And secondly, any sales hire that you should be making should not be a management layer. A VP of sales, a vice president of sales is a manager. A vice president of sales is not a person who you bring in to help you build the sales process. And meanwhile, they're going to be responsible for doing the selling. Like, hey, new VP of sales, good news. You have the VP of sales title. So we need you to build our sales process. And I also need you to grow from $300K to $2 million in revenue in the next 16 months so we can raise our Series A. That is not the job of a VP of sales. That is not the job of anybody in your company except for you as the founder. So when we talk about hire slowly, it's not just running a full and complete recruiting, interviewing, hiring process. It's really getting clear on, do I even need to hire? Should I be hiring for this role right now? So I use the VP of sales example as one. Another example could be, even if you decide, hey, I'm not going to hire a VP of sales, but hey, I got 10 customers, 300K in revenue. What I really need is account executive. I need somebody who can just come in and get some more deals in the pipeline and use the Rolodex and use their 15 years of experience selling in the industry. Even though they were selling Salesforce to our vertical, they have experience in the industry. They know how to sell software. They know how to work with tech companies. They've got this huge network of people they can sell to. So I'm going to get this AE to come in and help us close more deals so we can get to $1 million in revenue in the next, 16 months. No, like that is not the right hire. You need to take things more slowly, because if you were to hire that account executive, even if they were the best salesperson in the world, and even if they have this wonderful Rolodex, that salesperson is likely going to fail. And if you're listening to this, maybe, just maybe you or somebody you know has done this before. You've made this mistake, or people that you know have made this mistake, where they got so excited and so anxious to grow, to get from 300K to $1 million, or get from $1 million to $3 million in revenue quickly, that they thought they were doing the right thing by simply finding great talent and having that person do all the work. Again, hire slowly means that you take your time to know, what is our sales process? How do we create a repeatable sales process so that how do we get leads in a repeatable way? How do we qualify those leads? How do we do customer discovery the right way? Everything related to how you're running your product demos. How do you make sure you get the right stakeholders in the room? What are the key questions you need to be asking? Like, so many things go into understanding your sales process. And all of those are necessary components to even know what kind of account executive you're going to be hiring in the first place. So again, you have to hire slowly. And that just doesn't mean taking your time once you've decided to hire a salesperson. It's more about taking your time to decide if and when you should be hiring a salesperson. So this concept of hire slowly on the first part of this principle, hire slowly, goes to taking some things that we'll talk about next, which is extreme ownership. Taking ownership of your sales process, taking ownership of knowing what it takes to actually sell in a repeatable way so that you can scale down the road by hiring salespeople, account executives, SDRs, customer success people, and eventually a VP of sales. And those are some of the topics I want to get into when we have Amy Volas on the show to talk about how you can't scale what you don't have. Okay. So that's the hire slowly piece. Now, the second part of this, fire quickly. Fire quickly. That means having the temerity, having the ability to say, hey, I made a mistake. As a founder, I made a mistake, either because I hired somebody who might be an all-star. They might be a superstar salesperson, but I made the mistake thinking that we needed a VP of sales. And turns out we don't need a VP of sales. Or, hey, I hired this VP of sales and they seem to be really good when it comes to building process, or they spent a lot of time building out our tech stack, or they've talked to me about how we need to hire a 3-person sales team for them to manage in order to scale sales. That's a problem. We need to look at that hire and say, well, is this what the business needs right now? Because your business becomes its own entity. It becomes its own, in a sense, its own living, breathing organization. And for that organization to survive and to thrive, we need to care for that business. And if the business needs something other than a VP of sales when you have 10 customers that's only focused on documenting process and building out a tech stack and talking about how they need more salespeople and better support for marketing, then it's our responsibility to recognize that, hey, we made a mistake. Even though this person was highly regarded, even this person is very successful, even though this person might be highly talented, the business doesn't need this kind of role. So we need to learn from that, and we need to fire that person quickly. Now, we need to do it with empathy, and we need to do it with ownership. However, we need to make that move once we realize that maybe we don't need this role in the first place. Now, the other place where you need to fire quickly is where you decide, like, hey, this person is not working out. And again, this comes to some ownership, and this goes to hiring slowly. Because let's say you hire this account executive and say, great, we're going to grow to $2 million in sales in the next 16 months. And your responsibility is to make sure you know what the metrics are that you're going to hold that person responsible for. And the metric can't be that they closed an additional $1.5 million in business in the next 16 months, because enterprise sales takes a long time. The metrics need to be much shorter. They need to be much tighter. They need to be much sooner. We need to know, okay, did this person create a number of opportunities, a set number of opportunities worth a certain amount of dollars for our target customers that I, as a founder, can verify are in fact qualified leads, qualified opportunities in the first 3 months' time. Because if that account executive that we brought in, that's supposed to have this big Rolodex and all this experience, if they're not able to build pipeline, legitimate pipeline, not just, oh, I talked to so-and-so at XYZ Bank who I knew from my old gig, and they said they might be interested, and entering that into our sales pipeline as an opportunity. Like, no, we as founders need to know what it takes to qualify an opportunity and say, no, that one is a suspect, not a prospect. That's not a qualified opportunity, talking to one VP at some bank that you know, and that person said they might be interested. We need to know exactly what it means to have a qualified opportunity. If that person isn't generating enough qualified pipeline in a short period of time, we need to look at that person, or more importantly, look at the process and say, did we hire this person at the right time? Maybe we weren't ready to hire an AE, or maybe this person just isn't the right fit for us. Right? The same with, say, an SDR. You hire an SDR, you go, great, we're going to have this SDR book a bunch of meetings for us. Well, if we don't have a process that we have done ourselves for sending out outreach and doing outbound and booking meetings on a predictable, repeatable way, and we hire SDRs and say, your job is to book 3 meetings a week, get to 12 a month to hit your quota, but we've never done it ourselves, and we've hired this person and they've not been able to book meetings, well, that's a case where we might need to look at ourselves and say, hey, I need to attack the process here, not the person. It's not the person's fault that they're not succeeding. It's my fault. It's the process's fault. And again, this goes into the next principle we'll talk about, which is extreme ownership. Now, on the other hand, let's say you have done outbound. You're the founder and you've done outbound and outreach, and you've built out a sequence, and you have done the phone calls, and you have done the LinkedIn outreach, and you have a system that you know works for yourself. And you hand that to a person, and you train that person, and you oversee that person, and you make sure that that person really understands exactly what to do every day. And that person is not succeeding. Well, first, let's just double, triple check that the process is right and repeatable for that person versus you as a founder. But if all of that seems to check out and that person simply isn't able to do the job, maybe they're afraid to pick up the phone, even though they said they've been an SDR before. Maybe they go off script with emails. Maybe they decide that the sequence you wrote was okay, but they wanted to do their own sequence, and that sequence is not working. Maybe they're not using LinkedIn appropriately, and they're blasting email connections or LinkedIn connections to people, even though you know that's not the process. If they're not following the process that works, and you know that process does work and could work for them, now you have a talent problem. You have a person problem that you need to remove from the organization. Because ultimately, the biggest mistake I see in this situation, whether it's the SDR, the AE, or even a VP of sales that was hired, is that the founder, and I've talked to founders specifically who say, I have this person that haven't closed a deal in 9 months, or the one deal they've closed, I had to personally intervene. And I was the one that basically did the deal. I'm the one that did the demo. I'm the one that answered the technical objections. I'm the one that negotiated the contract. All that AE did really was get us a foot in the door because they had a contact at that bank. Okay. Like the thing that I see too often is the founder's like, yeah, but I mean, at least I have somebody talking to customers, or I don't want to give up that Rolodex, or I feel bad that I haven't supported that person enough. Well, look, at the end of the day, if the person's not performing, like all you're doing is running an expense on your balance sheet. You can't afford those expenses, especially in today's times. You need to make a change. You need to let that person go. The same with the VP of sales. If you're like, look, I hired this VP of sales, even though I gave them the VP title, even though I didn't feel like it was really warranted, but this person was really senior. They said they really wanted the title. They were going to work on process and tech stack. And I told them they also need to convert deals, and they had carrying a bag and they have a quota and they're not hitting their number. Again, we might feel like, I just don't want to let that person go because I feel bad. Or I feel like maybe there's some other things they're doing that have a lot of value, even though they're not closing deals. Well, you got to make that decision. You got to fire quickly. What's best for your company? So whether it's the wrong person in the right seat, or you've got the right person in the wrong seat, either way, if there's no way to repair that, to get that wrong person in the right seat better at what they do, training them up to be, in fact, the right person in the right seat, or you've got the right person in the wrong seat and there's no way to get that right person into the right seat at your company, then you need to make that change. You owe it to your company, you owe it to your investors, you owe it to your customers, you owe it to the rest of the team that is performing to let that person go. Now, do it humanely, do it with empathy, take ownership of the mistakes you may have made, but ultimately you need to move on, and it's okay because that's what the business needs. So that's what I mean by hire slowly, fire quickly. So many more details we can get into. I hope to cover some of this with Amy Bullis when we get her back on the show, talk about how you can't scale what you don't have, because number 7 and number 8 are so intertwined when it comes to thinking about how you scale your startup. And I know that she'll have some great perspectives on this particular sales rule, this first principle as well. So, all right. That's it for now. I think we've covered this topic pretty well as catching you up on what other sales principles are involved with these top 10 sales rules or these top 10 first principles. So in the next episode, just to give you a little preview, we're going to talk about principle number 9, which is extreme ownership. Extreme ownership, and a big hat tip to Jocko Willink, who wrote a book by that title. I followed his podcast and I've read his books, a couple of his books. This is a topic that he talks about all the time, and we've adopted that into our business ourselves, and we've promoted this concept to our clients in their business. And the concept is that it's our fault. No matter what happens, whatever mistakes are made, whatever result happens, it's our fault. And taking extreme ownership is the true path to leadership, the true path to really owning the future and the accomplishments that will be at your company. So that's the next episode coming out. All right. Thanks for listening to the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci. That's me. If you've liked this episode, would love it if you would take a moment right now, share with a friend or 10. Viral continues to be the number one way for podcast listenership to grow. If you haven't already subscribed, please do, so we can keep you updated with every new episode coming out. We're going to continue to pump out these episodes as we have been doing for the last 7 years. Yes, 7 years we've been doing these podcasts. It's one of my favorite things to do every week. Every month is to pump out these episodes to share these ideas with you. And I would also appreciate if you could leave us a review. Tell us how we're doing. Tell somebody else that might be on Spotify or SoundCloud or Apple Podcasts. Tell them what you like or love about the show, because that helps us get the word out. Those podcast platforms look at those reviews, and based on the reviews, they boost our show and put our show in front of other people just like you, so we can get more and more listeners. Okay. So again, thanks for listening to the show. Looking forward to the next episode and the next couple, finishing out the series. And for now, go out, have a great day, and looking forward to the next episode with you. See ya.